Welcome everybody to Friday regular recovery live. I'm Tom. I'm a recovered alcoholic. It's August 19th. We're in the middle of the summer. We're towards the end of the summer, second week in August here where I am in the Northeast. New Jersey's, we're out of our heat wave, so the weather's kind of feeling fall-like a little bit, which is a little bit saddening for me because fall means that winter's coming. And while I like fall, I don't like the winter. We got a great show for you today, guys. We're going to be bringing on some of our founders and some of those in our leadership that have been with Came to Believe since the beginning, really the founders of what we are presenting today at the retreats, the beginners of the retreats. And we're going to have a great discussion about the history and talk a lot about where we've been and some of the fun things we've done, some of the challenges we've had, and really enlighten how long this has been going on and how many people we've really touched over 50 years and really over, say, 30 since I've been involved. And so it's going to be really interesting. We're going to invite any of your questions or comments, and we hope that you enjoyed today's show. Anna Branson always joins first. So, hi, Anna. We are working on getting over there to Kentucky, Anna. We're going to be there one of these days before you know it. We have 3 retreats going on, guys, in one weekend coming up. It's going to be another Came to Believe Recovery First. In the month of May, we had 4 retreats in 1 month. And this next weekend, we're going to have 3 retreats going on in one weekend. It's the first time that we've ever done that. We're going to be in Loma Mar, California. We're going to be in Indiana, and we're going to be live in the UK for retreats all on next weekend. And so next Friday's Recovery Live will be featuring everybody. We're going to see if we can pull this off and get everybody from the 3 retreats on Recovery Live and talk about what's going on at each retreat and the excitement of beginning to watch people have that transformation. So that's coming up. But without further ado, guys, I'd love to bring on one of my 3 guests today. And this gentleman I met, I think, back in 1993 or 94 at one of my first retreats in Florida. And he has the honor of being a sponsee of Clarence Snyder and one of our founding members of Came to Believe Recovery and one of the writers of our Legacy Guide. I want to welcome from Orlando, Florida, Steve Foreman.
Here's Steve. Hi, everybody. My name's Steve Foreman. I'm a very grateful recovered alcoholic and to be extremely pleased and proud to be a part of the Came to Believe movement.
We met a long time ago, Steve. I was trying to figure it was probably like 1993 or 94 down at a Leesburg retreat.
I'm sure that's right. And thank God you're on board and ready to go and hanging in there with us.
Right. And guys, I'll tell you one of the stories that touched me when I was first in, and at that time I was only in, it might have been my second retreat ever. I didn't know that much about this group of people that I was going to now be getting involved with. And we were getting ready to go down to Leesburg. Me, Michael Kohler, and Emilio Mesa were going to go. And anyway, long story short, Vicky Weishert, who was also a Clarence sponsor, said to us, call this Steve Foreman. You can stay with him. And I'm like, well, we never met him. He's not going to let us. I've never met him in my life. I don't know anything. Who would let you stay at their house if they didn't meet you? Anyway, she says, just call him. So I remember calling Steve at his office and talking to him a few minutes. And sure enough, that grace, that openness, that just to allow us. And he said, yeah, you can stay at the house. And not only that, we got to the house and there was nobody there. The doors were open. I still remember it. There was a list, I'm sure Sue made it, assigning us rooms. But that was a big deal to me and to us to see this group of people who trust us and have got a character about them. So that was my first experience. And then we met up the next day. But it's all history now, right, Steve? Because we've been doing this for a long time.
Yes, sir.
So I'd like to bring on my next guest, who Steve knows really well too. And us has had. You've been married to Mrs. Foreman for how many years now?
Coming up 61 this month.
61 years. Wow. Um, and of course, Sue has been part of this program as well the whole time, and knew Clarence and Grace and all of this, and has been an integral part in everything we've been doing, growing and traveling and doing all the stuff we're going to talk about. So I want to welcome Mrs. Susie Foreman. I call her Susie. Hi, Susie.
Judy, hello. I love that story about come on down.
Yeah. We were shocked.
That house had seven bedrooms in it. The part we don't tell, though, is each bedroom was like 10 feet by 11 feet. It was cozy.
They were cozy. I do remember walking in, and it was like the rooms were numbered, and Tom was in this room, and Mike was in that room, and Emilio was in the other room. And I loved that house. I remember that.
Not quite like the Biltmore, but they had numbers on the door.
We did have numbers on the door. I kind of like my room at your house now, though, so it's nice.
About three times the size.
My room at their house. He said, "You got my room ready when I come down."
I got it ready. Your room's ready.
But, it is a bunch of hospitality, and we see it all over the country. I've stayed in other. I'll tell you another story about staying at houses, but we'll let Taryn come in, because it fits into all of this history and what we've all been through over the years to get things going, and what we've participated in. Anyway, so my third guest today is someone I met. She's going to correct me. And it was also in 1990 something. It was her first retreat, and she'll correct me if that's so, but it was her first. It was only mine, fourth or fifth. But it was way back then in the 90s. And Taryn still today is one of our retreat leaders in California and Arizona now, and is one of our senior leaders and has been a part of us for a long time. So I want to welcome Taryn Price.
Hey, how are you? And it was 95, and it was my first retreat. You got it right. I don't
hurry up, internet.
You got it right. And I too met the Foremans at that retreat and my whole purpose of going to that retreat was
while we're waiting. How did Steve get a logo on his?
He's in the right corner
not
of the
on
building.
His screen. It's on mine. Never mind.
Yeah, he's just on the right corner.
Yeah,
I know Lisa would give you something. So welcome, guys. I'm just so happy to see all of you, and you're my family. You know, when we are all together, we're never all of us together very often, and I can't actually remember the last time the four of us were in the same room together. But we got to make that happen. So many.
David was there. Doc Roth was there at my first retreat, also.
Doc Roth, that's what he says.
He was like he's here all the time.
Here all the time. So we do want to get into this discussion. I want to start to talk about our history, but let's say hello to some of the people of our guests today. Let's see who's joined us. Wesley Branson. Wesley's with us nearly every week now. Of course, Anna, as I have said, welcome to already. Doc Roth, how are you, buddy, out there in Las Vegas? He's a regular. Jay Sense. Jay, where are you from, Jay? Dee is with us today from England. So we got Manchester, England on today. I don't know that we're going to get Melissa McManus, because rumor says Melissa McManus is over here in the States, but she may show up. Christopher Keogh from Ireland. So today, right now, we have Las Vegas, we have Ireland, we have Manchester, UK, we have Lexington, Kentucky, right, Anna? See, I know, with us. And if I'm not wrong, maybe Wesley is in Wisconsin. I don't know. So we got quite a big audience from all over the country with us to hear you guys talk about how we got started, right?
How did we get started?
So we just for you guys in the audience who may or may not have, if it's your first time signing on to Camp Recovery Live, you have no idea who we are or what we're talking about. We're a representatives or an organization called Came to Believe Recovery, and what we do is we present retreats, weekend retreats all around the country and the world, and we present the program of Alcoholics Anonymous the way the founders did it. We have our roots back to Clarence Snyder, who was one of the original 40 and was sponsored by Dr. Bob. and Clarence sponsored Steve and took him through the program just the way they were doing it back in the 30s and the 40s, where they had like 90+% success. And that was permanent, sustainable sobriety, guys, having their lives changed and living in the fourth dimension of existence. And Steve grabbed onto that program along with Sue and along with BJ and Jack and along with Carol Morfitt and Dale Morfitt, who was also a sponsee of Clarence's, and they got together and wrote a legacy guide, which is what we use as our workbook at the retreats. Back in 2005, you wrote it, right? In your head nod, it was 2005. And the whole purpose of it, guys, was to keep this legacy alive, keep this message alive, and help us spread the word that those guys were recovered, and so can you. They said they were recovered, and there is a way to get through this program quickly. It's what they were doing. So that's what we do at our retreats. And we've been doing this now. We'll let Steve tell us how long he's been doing it, but for a long time. And we've been out there spreading the message of the founders and getting people jump started into their recovered lives in a weekend. And we've seen tens of thousands of people take their life back. I was thinking about that today. Maybe you guys talk about that later. How many people do we think went through retreats over the 40 or 50 years since it got, really the 30 years since it's got going good? Probably 20 or 30,000. But anyway, Steve, when did you start the retreats? What was your first retreat?
It was I came into the program in January of 1979, ran into Clarence, asked him to sponsor me, and he did. Took me through the 12 steps, the old timers way. And then in March of 79, he said, we got this retreat going on. And it was down in Brandon, Florida. And it was a soul retreat, the only one that was going on in a very rustic, Spartan, shall we say, setting in Brandon, Florida.
So that's interesting, Steve. Now, at that retreat, had Clarence told you anything about why he was doing these retreats? He took you through the steps. Had he given you any insight into that?
No, it was presented to me as a way to further my knowledge about AA, about the experiences of other people who had come through the 12-step process. And there were any number of old timers at that retreat. It was frankly a retreat for reunions of people who Clarence had sponsored and so on. So we were newcomers, so to speak. Myself, a guy named Dick Stultz came on board, Jim Page, and ultimately Jack Rapp. But that 1979 retreat was one of great discomfort to me because all the men stayed in one bunkhouse, and the name of that day was Bob Rathke. Bob Rathke snored worse than anything or anybody you have ever been in a room with. And so, I went to Clarence. I said, I can't stand this anymore. Besides, there are no wives here and no children, and so I will not be staying at this retreat anymore. I'll be down at the Days Inn, adopting the Steve Foreman retreat accommodation theory, where we have private baths and private beds, and Sue and I can stay together. So men and women were separated. My bitching and moaning over a certain year or half a year, Clarence said, let's move the retreat to Leesburg, which we did in 1980, 81 probably. And there was a setting of more motel style private rooms, 2 to a room, private bath, good food. So from that point on, the retreat blossomed.
White porcelain was kind of a requirement for him. This going down the hall,
so
porcelain bathroom.
That's the first retreat I went to when I came to Leesburg. I did not go to that one, guys, back then in '79. Obviously, I didn't come in, but I was introduced at Leesburg at the time. Now, it's quick to note before we get too far into it, Steve, at the beginning, those first few retreats, they were not actually taking people through the steps at the retreats in those early days, right? I mean, not in the format we do it today.
No, they did not. In 1981, I'm guessing 80, 81, guy named Dale Morfitt came to a retreat in Leesburg, and he said, well, we need to start one of these up in Amory, Wisconsin. So we went to Amory with Clarence and Grace in 1981, I'm guessing, certainly in the early 80s, and started a retreat there with Dale and Carol Morfitt. So that was our second retreat. And at that retreat, a year or so later, we had what I'd call dead afternoons. People go fishing, people go down to Walmart, people go here, just kind of a dead time on Saturday. And we suggested to Clarence that we have a 12-step class on Saturday afternoon, taking people through the old-fashioned way, the 12 steps. And that's what happened. The first one of those was probably 1982 in Amory, Wisconsin. Subsequently, that same format moved to Leesburg and has been a part of our retreat weekend ever since.
So, and it's interesting to note, guys, that back in the 30s, or back when Clarence was overwhelmed with people wanting to go through the steps, because it had been so successful, he had found himself a theater that he was going to use, the upstairs, and he was taking people through in groups in that theater back then. So this is not something we came up with. This is something that was being done back then and very, very successful. So for us to bring that back and to be doing it that way was very appropriate, right, Steve?
Absolutely. In the early retreats that Clarence had from 1966 to say 1979, that format had not been followed. So we just rekindled an old idea that worked with a 90% plus recovery rate, and those numbers continue to stand for those people who come to our retreats and go through the 12 steps.
Perfect. And so today, guys, as you know, we do take you through the entire 12 steps over the weekend. You'll get that introduction. You leave with it with instructions and some encouragement to work your 10, 11, and 12 for the rest of your life, because that's required, to maintain our spiritual condition and to keep our watch for those things that had us in bondage before. And we got to do our step 9. But you do get through the steps in the weekend. We have expanded the format a little, just so we do the steps over the whole weekend, which we found very successful. It's still a very quick way to do it, but it's been very successful. And so the main purpose of us here at Came to Believe Recovery, guys, is to get you through those steps and get you to that transformation so that you can start your life over again. And when you come to our retreats, that's the main message that you're going to see is let's get you through the steps and let's get you going on a program of recovery.
One of the things I understood, Tom, from Clarence is that in those old days, people were taken through their steps before they were in meetings. So they wouldn't do the steps in the meeting so much, but they would do the steps kind of in a side private room. And much like he did with Steve, he took him through the steps and then he went to the retreat. And then Clarence had 2 styles. He did a talk that was his story, his, how he drove to New York and where, it's a fabulous story. But when he was at a retreat, he did his stories about steps. We have several of his talks on the old reel tapes, and he would do a step. What he would do at the retreat was really concentrate on those 12 steps. But the talks that he would give were more about his story. The ones that he would do at a conference, or because he was always asked to be at being the oldest living, longest sober alcoholic from the original group. He always was famous talking somewhere, but when he was at the retreat, his talk was about 12 steps and less about himself.
Brought that up, Sue, because that is a point in recovery, in the 12-step recovery world, is do you go to meetings and then do your steps? And they did not do that back at the beginning. People were taken through their steps and then they went to a meeting. Those guys were taken. That's very historically accurate too. And so for Clarence to have taken people like Steve through his steps ahead of time and then go to a retreat for growth and help and fellowship and blah, blah, would be very appropriate of what they were doing. So guys, again, if you're listening, you're hearing it from the horse's mouth. You're hearing it from those that were there, who heard it from those who started this thing. This is who did it. This is how they were doing it back then. And this is how we're going to be doing it. We're going to get you through those steps. And we'll send you back into the meetings, but that's the fellowship. We're going to send you back in those meetings to spread the word and to grow in your 10, 11, and 12 and things. And it's what we do at a Cambridge League big book study meeting that follows up the retreat. Is we help you work your 10, 11, and 12 and break those habits that you have, because we know they're in, and help you learn how to use those 6 hours a day to get your life back. So Sue, I want to ask you, because you and me we were looking at the history of retreats at one point, and there's probably 100 Google Docs with all of this stuff on it. But there was a point in the 80s that went through, and I didn't come in until the 90s. But when I came in, there was only 4 retreats in the country. There was Leesburg that went twice. There was 2 in
Amory,
Wisconsin, right? There was 1, right? And then there was the New Jersey one at Schooley's Mountain, and that's all there was. And I remember that you guys would come to them all. Pretty much everybody came to them all. These guys,
Right.
Grace and Annette, everybody came to all the retreats. And but then there was a big growth point, and it was somewhere right in the mid to late. It really was the late 90s,
early.
early 90s.
Earlier.
Okay, and
Well, big, because we've done a little of that, but there was a growth spurt at some point there.
right. And what do you remember about that time when because I remember that all of a sudden we were going to be traveling to these new places.
Australia, we went to England. Annette Nelson opened the very first retreat. It was Steve and Liz Rogers, Sue, and Annette, because Annette was the woman who started the first retreat in 1966 in Brandon, the one that Steve went to. It was Annette, Nelson, and Grace. So Annette was the expert speaker coming from the USA to start the first retreat in England in Buckfast Abbey. So that was 85, Steve? No, wait a minute. That was later than that. That was like 92, somewhere in the next year. So that was a big boom of growth there, just by going there. But at the same time, Dale and Stephanie went to Australia. And there was and they did a retreat in Sydney. And it was, we were going great guns there for a while. And there's something about, now on the internet, you can look up how to take your business to scale. There is something about taking something to scale that we dropped the ball several times there with people, because we sort of inherited a retreat and an ethos in a group. So when we were asked to start the Leesburg retreat, I think I took a lot for granted about what it took to start one. And I'm sure Steve did too, because he's in the program, and there are all these people that were helping. And so we thought, well, gee, this is not that bad. We'll just start another one. And then we discovered that you really need a lot of people to run these. It is not a one-man show, generally.
You also need people who are willing to commit, because it's a commitment. It is a commitment. Mm-hmm. It's not a fly by the seat of your pants type of deal. It'd be great if it was, but it isn't. It takes a lot. For me, it took a lot of encouragement, and it started with being in somebody's back pocket, meaning being their helper, and then having it grow into something that I would have never expected. 20 years later, I'm still here in Prescott. I would have never, that would have never occurred to me that it would have happened that way. It is a true commitment.
Yeah. So that's how it had to go at that time.
So that's interesting, Sue, that you're saying, because that was my next question was, how did someone start a new one? So you had the four, right? And I kind of know from behind, but I'm here. When someone said, okay, we're going to start a new one in England,
Or Las Vegas, we had a couple in Vegas.
Las Vegas, I mean, how did those conversations go? Was there criteria at the time? You're kind of telling us it was a little seat of the pants. How did those conversations go back then?
We did a lot of praying, and some of them failed.
But if I recall, too, the team went. That's right, Steve? Like everybody went.
Yeah.
To it to help it get started.
Mhm.
And that was true in Ireland. Kim
Yeah.
Spencer, Liz Rogers, Sue and I went to Ireland, started one, went to Scotland with Kathy Walker, the same team. And so it was, our style was, okay, you want to start a retreat, we got the top 4 or 5 people to come and kick off the retreat in a fashion and manner that we felt was good. The same thing with Taryn and Bill Rose and what went on down there. And when David Roth or Doc Roth showed up, he was there probably 35 years ago.
Mhm.
And it was a canned presentation at that point. We had it down pretty well. We tried to carry the message to Russia. Myself and Sue and John Zamrock and Mike Kohler went over there, and that was an interesting thing. But it wasn't until the final day when somebody called our room, and I don't know how he found us or whatever else, and he said, "I've got the message. It's Jesus." Well, that was a tear-jerking experience at about midnight. The guys,
Mhm.
I don't know whatever happened, but we made presentations to the medical groups in treatment centers, and they had hyperbaric chambers to cure people, and other
Salt chambers. They'd put them in salt chambers. That was going to fix them.
and something else. So that was an interesting trip that ended up God knows where. They didn't even have an AA book over there. They all used the 12 steps and 12 traditions.
And when we met for dinner, they'd have these bottles of vodka on the table, and didn't catch the incongruence. Well, just put this bottle of vodka right here.
So let's fast forward a little, guys, because that was how we got. We know that's what happened. Is the team, like, you guys went out and then created other teams, which created other teams, and it expanded and it got to where at one point back in the 2000s we were up to like 37 or 38 retreats going on in the country and in the UK a year. COVID took a hit on us, like it did everyone in the on-ground retreats. We're coming back. But Steve, I was talking to Steve this morning, and I had him scratching his head to think about how many retreats do you think you've been to in your time since '79?
A big guess, but probably somewhere between 150 to 200, probably closer to 200 retreats.
And
that's
Sue,
over a 43-year period, and many years we started 3 or 4 or 5 in a given year.
Would you say that's the same number for you, Sue? Because you guys went to all those together, basically, right?
Probably 5 others that he went to by himself.
5 or 6 others. And Taryn, how many do you think you've been to in your time?
Well, if I'm not counting returning, because I've returned to many.
Right.
So if I'm counting just the standard.
Oh. No,
I
count the
mean,
returning.
I'm counting how many times I've returned, because I've returned, I'm going to say at least 60.
Yeah, count them.
But mine are all been here. Pardon?
Yeah. Count all on every time you've attended a retreat for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to count off of Steve, because I would think that he has spent a lot more time and a lot more than 100 and something. So if you count how many years Leesburg in itself has been going twice a year, so how do you want to count it? I'm going to count it that way. Never had the privilege of going overseas. It's my prayer that Spain kicks back up, because I want to go to Spain. Tom and I had a breakfast conversation about Spain while we were passing sunshine on to a little lady in a restaurant. And I'm looking forward. I really look forward to the opportunity. I know the opportunity has been given. I've been asked to come to Wales, it's just going to be a while before I get there. But I'm ready to go to Wales. I'm excited about that.
I was thinking, Steve, today, and I asked you to think too about how many states and how many places we've been to do retreats. What do you think? How many states have you been and countries doing retreats?
Well, it'd be a guess, probably the states around somewhere between
countries.
15 and 20. And different countries, probably 6 or 7 different countries over the years.
Long Island.
So the international part of this, guys, is one thing that we're working on, and the UK now has gotten has gotten large, and we're ready to jump off to the UK, maybe again into Europe. I went to Spain twice, and so Spain is someplace that we want to go to. We were luckily Spain. We went to it was a mostly British expatriates in Spain, so we didn't have a language barrier. We got more of a language barrier in the Bronx coming up than we did in Spain, as it turns out. But we've been all over the country. And Sue, you were at, that would be probably the same for you, right? 15 or 20 states and 6 or 7 countries.
Oh yeah, but I just want to ask Taryn, what is it we always say after every retreat on Sunday? Of course, I won't talk about what we say on Friday and Thursday, but on Sunday and Monday, we always say,
best retreat ever.
exactly. We say it every time. It's brand new. And if we do probably exactly the same thing, I don't know what kind of a disease that is, but every single one is so fresh, so brand new. And I don't know what that is. There's something about watching the faces come in so heavy, you can feel the weight and the tentativeness on Friday. And then you get to Sunday and the week later, and now 40 years, 25, 30 years later, and you see the people that you met 25 years ago, 2015.
Yeah.
And they are amazing people. And every single retreat we say, that was the best retreat ever. Is that I don't think it's a dementia. I think every retreat.
I think it's a truth.
Real good.
And it works real good. You bet.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a truth. That's what I think. It's a truth, because before this way of living, I existed. So today I have opportunities for growth and opportunities to experience living. And so all things are new. And if all things are new, then your eyes are right open and wide, and you're looking at for me, I look at that as, I gain just as much as what I believe I'm attempting to give. And so when it's freely given, you can freely receive. So we pour ourselves out and we get filled back up. And
it's always new somehow. Always new.
It's as if you've come home. I like when you were talking about, Tom, that you have your room at the Foreman's. I've only had the privilege of being there, staying there once. But
we have a room
because I only came to Leesburg once. But I bet we probably have the same room. If it was the one upstairs, it was absolutely.
That's my room.
It is the hospitality. One of my fondest memories is Amory, because Dale Morfitt was my papa. And so I remember the very first time we went to Amory and we drove up that long driveway and there was that big red barn. And I knew in my heart that on the right-hand side of the road, there was going to be a swing, and there was a swing in the tree. And just coming down the creaky old stairs of that farmhouse to have coffee with him in the morning, what an honor.
Family. And there are usually horses in those barns.
Oh, my husband fed a lot of horses in that barn. He helped Carol feed the horses, but that was just those are the things. Being able to stay in Texas with Tom for the first Texas retreat, that was fun. I mean, I had fun. I don't know about you, Tom, but I had fun. It was a good time. And the hospitality there with Vicki Weichert was beyond anything I would have imagined.
The family members, it's a hospitality that you just cannot replace.
We are family.
So guys, part of what this is showing our audience is how long we've been around and how long this thing has been going on. It's not something that just came out of nowhere and didn't and has stumbled along. Really, I was just in my head while you guys were talking, thought there's probably been 3,000-4,000 retreats, maybe 5,000 in the history. Think about that times 50 or 60 people in each retreat. You're talking 30,000-40,000 people have been through this program, and if they've done it and they held true, we're talking about that many people having their lives changed and calling themselves recovered, and not just calling themselves recovered, but being recovered.
Well, Tom, interestingly enough, we are getting our 30,000th. We have 30,000 legacy guides out there somewhere with this next printing of 2,500. So 27,500 legacy guides have gone somewhere. We just shipped another 100 to California today, and I'm not saying they're going like hotcakes, but people crave this message, and they come away from a retreat saying, I can't believe I didn't know about this. Yeah, okay, well, it certainly worked well in 1938 with part of the Oxford group until 39 when the book was written, and Clarence carried this message, and that's what we're doing.
And North Carolina, Rose just took a bundle again that she's going to use at a homeless residential facility for women. So
you talk about legacy guides going out like that, Steve. I remember when there wasn't a legacy guide,
right?
And what you had 4 big books. You had 4 people, and they were highlighted. They were marked, and then there you had a little guide. And this little guide, we had the going through the step guide, but then you had the guide that gave you some helpful little thoughts. But I'm going to tell you, many of those were put out because many of those had been reprinted and printed and reprinted and printed. So there's probably a whole lot more out there that we haven't even recognized is there.
Right.
And another 5,000 another 5,000 in the UK, I think.
There you go.
Right.
So, and then
is it a requirement for somebody to snore at your first retreat? I want to know that, because at my first retreat with you, Thomas, I recall there was a bear in our campground. We used to up in TVs, but there was a bear, and you were quite adamant that you wanted to put the bear down.
Michael Kohler.
Is that a requirement?
I think Steve's first one, he had one.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Is that a requirement?
Well, I'm writing it out of the policies and procedures right now.
Okay. Just checking.
One day we'll talk about the Foreman rule of travel, which I didn't learn soon enough with the Foreman rule. But Steve pulled me aside, I think me and Michael, and talked to us about the rule of travel, the Foreman's rule of travel when you travel to these retreats, which are so we say nicely rustic, right, Steve? Some of the places in nice terms.
Well, you kind of broke up, Tom. Were you saying to share an experience at one of these?
I was talking about when you were telling us about the Foreman rule of travel way back then.
Well, the first one was in Amory, because they had a camp there, and again, women and men split up in different cots, and 4 and 8 to a bedroom, and so on. So we vacated immediately and went downtown to the beautiful Camelot Motel, which the latest one, we were there about 5 years ago or so. We stayed at the Green Tree Inn or whatever. But there have been several instances where, for example, in Indiana, we went to a retreat, I think near Terre Haute or somewhere, and we got in our room, and I said, well, I think I'll visit the restroom, open the restroom door, and here's this lady in her bra and panties standing in my restroom. And I said, holy cow, what's up? Well, we share the restroom.
It's a Pullman bathroom with the other couple.
My attitude was, no, we don't share the restroom. And Mike Lewandowski was at that retreat. And
it was he and his wife.
Room at the Hampton Inn down the road, because he did follow the Foreman accommodation theory of being comfortable, getting some sleep, and not listening to snoring other than that which you're already accustomed to.
Doc Roth says that it was the Danny Whitmore snoring that woke up the bears.
I was
Well, that was
attempting.
at a teepee. That's and Tom was there. My God, the accommodations. We stayed at the Pear Blossom Inn. Liz and I went out there first, and then Sue went. But Danny had these guys sleeping four to a teepee out on top of a tennis court, and I just said, well, the Foreman rule of accommodation is in
We're
effect.
going to the Pear Blossom.
And we went down the road. But Tom experienced the worst snoring, I think, similar to Bob Rathke.
The
So we-
entire camp did. Believe me, I was in the teepee opposite of my husband's. And so I heard it. And then I was trying to be polite in regards to Danny. I didn't want to have to bring out his name, but yeah, it was quite an experience.
But now, are we encouraging people to join our team with these stories?
I think we are.
Oh, sure. I mean, what we do,
We do have fun.
And most people don't know where we're staying. You know, we're down the road. We're there for breakfast. We show up early and we stay late. But I've got to get my Z's.
For me, I think it is important, Sue, because the very first retreat I attended was that TP retreat. And I was 2 weeks out of the step process. We came because we knew we were going to get to meet Grace Snyder. That was there was an ulterior motive for us. We were deterred because it was TPs and it didn't matter. I mean, I slept on pallets. It didn't matter to me. I would have slept anywhere at that point in time. But the people I met, the Foremans and Gracie and Mary Jo and Kathy Walker and
Treasured
I was
people.
in awe of them. They were, and I learned by virtue of hanging on and hanging out that you put your pants on just like I did, and you lived just like I did, and you cared about me genuinely. It wasn't. Hi, how you doing? There was none of that. And I think in recovery, I needed to learn that. You know, I walked in backwards, and so you guys put me right-sided.
Because we were all backwards too.
Well, but I just started counting of when you got sober, Steve. And you know what? I thought you were like 30 years sober when I met you.
Ah, that's true.
And I realized, you know what? You're like 16 years older than me. You were very grown up for 16.
Well, remember, we went to the hospital. Grace called us and said, come down to Winter Park Hospital on that March 22nd. And at that time, Clarence and Grace asked us if we would accept the mantle of the Leesburg retreat.
Yeah.
And at that time, that's 84. That is 5 years sober for him. And I'd been in Al-Anon since 74, so I had a whole 5 more years of no steps. No steps. I didn't have steps until Clarence took me through the steps. And the reason he did is because Steve thought I needed to be fixed. So you need to go through the steps with Clarence, and that'll fix you. That'll fix you.
That's how Bill Rose said it when he was taking Scott through. I came home and he said, "What's good for the goose is good for the gander," you know, Bill. And I looked at him and he goes, "So get out of your uniform because you're going through the steps." I was like, there wasn't a question. It was, this is what's happening. And I'm grateful. I'm just so grateful. Just because of the experiences that I've had. I have a plethora of people that I don't have to be connected every day to be connected every day.
That connection it's extraordinary. It's what you feel at the retreat. It even comes across. I guess there's a virtual retreat. If we're doing the history, everybody knows how that happened because of our international connections of trying to do leadership and how do we put this group together. How do we have a collective impact? Because we have these retreats and these people that are, and we've got the book. How can we really go to scale? And when that pandemic hit, you know, we're out of business. And then like a nanosecond later, we realized that we were already doing Zoom calls
Right.
for our board meetings because we've got 3 people in the UK. So we're not getting together unless we are able to do that. And I know there was could we do that? Yeah. Can we do it? How can we do a small group? And we figured out how you can have 30 people on the screen, and then you could do a 5th step with just 2 people
Right.
on the same screen. It's amazing. And then surely there's some magic about being in the same room for a weekend. No, I think the magic is the Holy Spirit, and evidently he works on Zoom as well.
So,
Well,
guys,
that's all encompassing. So, I mean, where you go, there he is. So it's kind of one of those. The one thing and I'm not going to say anything after. I'm going to try not to say anything after this. I just know that if you've been to a retreat and if you think you don't fit in, we're all God's kids. And we're all here for each other. That's what I learned here, is that there were people that were for me when I couldn't be for myself. And so don't cheat yourself on the fray out here. You don't have to be nothing but who you is, and that is enough. And that's I learned that from this process of how we live. I am enough.
Yeah.
I am of worth.
So guys, you've heard everybody got here, how we spread all over the country and in the world over these years. And what's driving us today, and what's driving me and our organization to expand even greater into new areas today, is this idea that the legacy guides are selling at such a rate. Because remember, they weren't written until 2005, and we've been going since the 90s. So 30,000 books have been sold. And since then, I don't know that all those people have been through the retreats, but they've heard the message and they're reaching out to us, and they want us to come and do these things in person or virtual or however we can. And so we've had this shift in those that want it, in rescue missions and shelters and churches and all sorts of places that we were not in back in these days when we were starting. It was get the team, go start one someplace, and if there were willing people, we went. And so today, guys, we're being more proactive at Came to Believe Recovery, and we're putting teams together ahead of time, and we're going into places, and we're being seeking out places and trying to get our word out so that we get more and more people. We want to double and triple. We'd love to see a retreat in every state. We'd love to be on virtual once a month. I know a couple of our California gang want us to be. And we'd love any of you that have been through it or are interested, please send us a message. Lisa's behind the scenes if you'd love to volunteer and help us. We're volunteer-driven guys. We also need some funding. We've got to be able to go out there and spread this message. So we're actively looking for some funds to be able to cover our costs. This is basically what we do, the cost of being able to spread out everywhere. And further.
You remember that Clarence was credited with starting sponsors. He was the first one that created the idea of having a sponsor. And and I think what this book does is let a sponsor be much more effective and much more confident, and be able to really, it's a teaching tool for a sponsor as well.
Great. All right, guys, we're nearing the end of our hour. Hashtag recovered for your chance to win a shirt. Lisa's behind the scenes getting ready to run our giveaway here. But one last word, Steve, where do you see us going here in the next 5 years?
Well, I think a lot of that is monetarily driven. Very successful in New York among the fundraisers up there. And Tom and I both are going back up there in the very near future to visit some large foundations. So under the presumption and the belief that God's going to supply us with the funds, we need about 2 or 3 more Tom Williams. There'll never be another Tom Williams, but someone who has the skill. And we know 2 or 3 who would be, but we have to have money to fund it, to hire them. So everybody, I mean, it's unbelievable what the interest in our program is. People want what we have, and they started willing to go Indian Lake to get it. And we're now into the Bowery. We're fixing to get into that up in New York City. We're going to the homeless shelters, and other places that are just generating, as they did in California, unbelief on how successful this program is. So I think we're on the springboard of some great future events. But so much of it does depend on our fundraising, which we're exercising all the skill and power in our command that God gives us to do that. So short term, I think we're going to look at hiring another 2 or 3 people, because this message can save lives. When you're running 90% plus recovery and the treatment centers are running under 15%, we have a message that's $220 or $250 for a weekend to change your life. Come on, tell me how that works. So we're going to be successful.
And guys, we can only do so much with volunteers. Even the greatest of nonprofits will always be predominantly volunteer. But Steve's right. We need a few people working for us, really behind the scenes, spearheading all the stuff going on. And there's logistics, and there's this, and there's that to get going. And the more people we have, the quicker we can grow. And the more people that will hear the message. The whole point is to get this message out to the least, the last, the lost, and the broken, and end addiction.
And don't wait for a retreat to use your legacy guide to take somebody through the steps. Do your part. You're part of that legacy. You're transmitting that information. And when you give it to someone, look, I was married to a ragtag guy, and this did nothing but change his life completely. He went from what a judge said was a menace to society to a man of God who changed lives. I would have never, and I had nothing to do with it. And believe me, I wanted everything to do with it. It all came because we were given, a man 12-stepped us for 5 years, gave us this message of came to believe, and then imparted in us to share that message with others. And you don't have to sit them down at your kitchen table to do that, but you surely should not wait for a retreat to get them through it. It's your responsibility. It's your gift. You need to give it away. And I now will be quiet.
There you are, George. Well, I want to thank you guys for coming again. This is like the shortest hour of the week. We'd love to have you on again, and we could keep this conversation going, to keep talking about where we came from and where we're going, and the legitimacy of what we're doing and the history of what we're doing. It's important, guys. I want to thank all of you for your diligence over all these years to stay strong and keep pressing on and saying yes when we say it. Steve says, send me in, coach. And Taryn shows up where everybody shows up and does their part. Sue edits stuff for me when I send her things, and she sends her drawing. So the team works hard behind the scenes. Let's switch over. Guys, you're welcome to stay with us if you'd like. If you're off for your day, thanks again for being with us. We're going to go over now and give our t-shirt giveaway. So Lisa, let's see how many people have asked for, done their hashtag recovered. Getting ready. It looked like a lot today. 15 people saying hashtag recovered. So we'll give you about 30 more seconds, guys. If you're not on hashtag recovered, that gets you entered in when you're sure. 15 people, come on. Who else? Anybody else want to do it? All right, Lisa, let's give it a shot. Who will it be this week? All right, would you put your address in our chat here, or send it to Came to Believe Recovery on our private message to Lisa, and she will get a shirt out to you. It was another great show today, guys. I hope you enjoyed listening to those guys. Great stories. You didn't even hear half the stories that there were that we could have told about retreats all over the country and all over the world. We're going to be in Indiana, Loma, California, and in the UK, in Kent, next weekend, guys. There's still openings if you're in the Indiana, Chicago area. There's still openings if you're in the San Francisco Bay Area for the retreat. We have another one on the third weekend in the 16th through the 18th in September in Nevada City in California. It's a beautiful location. Go on our website, canebelieverecovery.org, for all the upcoming retreats. We are, as Steve said, going to be in the Bronx at a rescue shelter in New York City. Very exciting to be asked to come into this place where addiction is running rampant in people's lives in the inner city. It's a desire of ours to be in the toughest places we can get into to share this message with those hurting the most. So we'll see you guys next week. I will be in Indiana coming to you live. Alicia will be with me. BJ will be with me. We'll meet the guys from California, and Dee will be on from England next week. We're going to have a great time as we come at you from 3 retreats in 1 weekend. And so have a great weekend, guys, and we'll see you next week.